ready?
I'm ready.
All right. So we're going to get started with the second half of our local file inclusion, and Adrian's going to show some advanced web shells beyond what we were just looking at a minute ago.
All right.
Take it away.
Hello, everybody. I'm going to be doing my demo in both Linux and Windows. I'm going to be switching back and forth, having some networking issues on VMware players right now. But I'm going to be talking about web shells, and he showed you some things you can do with local file includes and remote file includes to get a web shell there. But essentially, what a web shell is just a piece of code that allows you to remotely administrate, let's say. There's all sorts of web shells out there that do different functionality. I mean, if you want to go super simple, here's about the shortest web shell I think I've personally seen. And all this does, those little ticks, it executes what's in the tick that you get in on the parameters in the URL. So you might say, question mark, some command to run, and it will return the results to you. So shells can be really simple, or they can be a little bit more complex. Like this is an open source shell you can find out there on the net, B374K. It's pretty interesting, and I'll show you some more advanced ones besides just it. That these ones have a lot extra functionality. For instance, let's say SQL administration would be a function. But I'll show you a few of these shortly. The first thing I want to show you, though, is there's different classifications of remote shells. And possibly some of these aren't necessarily considered shells. You're going to have your general shell where you're issuing commands. You're also going to have uploaders. Uploaders are designed to be super simple and allow you to, well, upload a file. And you make them to be very reliable, and then once you have something that's reliable, you can hopefully, if they have some kind of weak permissions someplace, you can upload a better shell. Which here's a very simple PHP shell. I'm going to switch the language to, it didn't mean to paste that in. It simply takes input, it keeps track of what URL it's coming from, and allows you to upload a file. Now I can use this and remote file includes to do my evil, which is what I'm going to show you here shortly. Now there's a bunch of features you can turn off in PHP to make this more difficult, but allow URLs include and allow URL fopen. If these were both off, I wouldn't be able to do the things I'm about to do. Jeremy, do you know if they're on or off by default in various systems? I forget in XAMPP, it's been a while since
In the older PHPs, they were on, but in the very latest one, with XAMPP 1.8.1, they were off.
Yeah, so you may need to go in and turn these on for these exploits to work. But let me show you what we have going on.
If you go into Matilde on there's actually a page dedicated to local file inclusion, and right on that page it has those two listed for you. So if you don't remember them, just go to that page and they're listed there.
Jeremy, real quick, doesn't those have to be on for remote file inclusion too?
For
The
remote, yes.
URL include one is the remote, and the fopen is the local.
Okay. Let's see what all we have. But I've had an interest in web shells for a while. I have an article I wrote back in 2004 because I was at the local paper mill playing around, and they started giving students access to use PHP on their websites. Well, there's certain commands like a shell that you could use to execute anything you wanted on the web server. So you could have various fun of that, cruise around the file system. So that's when I first started playing around with it. And one of the shells I've had up, well, this is a version of that shell. This is another super simple shell. All it does is use the shell execute command and runs whatever it is I want to run. But let's actually show off using a few of those in a second. Right here we have some arbitrary file includes. Oh, by the way, this is a website of my run, hackme.irongeek.com. Feel free to attack it with any exploits you want. You'll get the joke later. But we're going to use remote file includes. Now we could go underneath of others, remote file inclusions, but I think as we had in one version of Matilde, we pretty much said the entire freaking site is one big remote file include vulnerability. So we're going to remotely try to include a file. In this case, I'm going to include one that I have up on my website. Notice the website is hackme.irongeek.com, but I'm just going to get this off of the regular irongeek.com, technically www. adcshell.txt. It's a .txt so that the web server doesn't interpret it as a PHP before sending it to us. But once it gets to this box, the box I'm actually going to be running the commands on, it gets interpreted as PHP. So I'm going to hit enter and hope for the best. Now, my install material today is running a little slow, so it may take a bit. But, ooh, I got a prompt. Well, he was mentioning before ways of telling, okay, what kind of system am I on? I'm going to use who am I? I am vid4 Adrian. The name of the box is vid4. I'm on Adrian. From that way that looks, I could probably tell that I'm on a Windows box just from that. But if I had any doubt, I could always do the old dir. Come on. Or, you know, something like, come on, Notepad. Okay, Notepad pops up. That'd be a simple, simple shell, but let's use something different. Let's use uploader. I want to upload a shell that has a few more features. So, I'm going to wait for upload to come up. And there's a few different shells I have here. I've collected a bunch in the wild as well, and I'll show you how I've been collecting them here shortly. But there's all sorts of shells. This is the default shell that I was using before. We can go with something a lot more complex than that. And by the way, that one's unobfuscated. There's all sorts of obfuscations people do. I had to modify that one to make it all fit into one eval function. And here's that same shell essentially obfuscated. Almost all the same code, just rearranged some. And then ROT13 encoded, base64 encoded, and also GZ zipped, essentially. And there you go. That makes it rather hard to read, though. If you see those functions side by side in a program, more than likely it's a little sketchy. There's also ways of detecting these, which I have a longer talk I'm going to be giving at Takedown Con in less than a month. So I've been doing a lot of research for that. But there's various techniques for spotting these, and there's tools out there as well for trying to find files like that. But that's an obfuscated one. There's actually much cooler obfuscated ones. Actually, that B374K one I mentioned before, they actually make a polymorphic one, at least that's what they call it. And it keeps changing its encoding every single time. Although as long as it has this in there, that's going to be an instant thing that you can use as a signature. But it essentially can change its encoding every single freaking time, though I suppose that assumes you also have write access. By the way, if someone has a well-configured web server, it's not going to be hopefully running with these files where you get write access to it. But it's really easy for people to screw that up. Like I've unzipped an archive one place, then copied it someplace else, but it kept the original file permissions, and all of a sudden all those files will still read-write. Or in the case of some shared hosting, everything runs underneath your account that you log in to manage things with, but also the web process is running as your account in a fashion. So if you can edit the file, so can any script on your page, depending on how they have things set up, which unfortunately DreamHost is set up that way. So that's a couple shells, but let's actually get my uploader and see what one of these shells looks like. I am going to upload this one. This is an open source one. I think this was done on Google Code or GitHub. I'm not quite sure. If you go Google searching for it, you'll find it. I'm going to send that one up, hopefully. And I take note of what directory it's in. And now I can just access it. Some of these shells you can't necessarily remote file include, like I did the uploader in the earlier shell. But if you get the uploader on there, then you can then upload the rest of the shell, or a better shell, I should say. So here's this one. I now have a lovely little interface where I can issue commands. I can explore around the file system. I can list what processes are on the box and kill them. Find out info about the system. This is pretty common. What PHP modules I have. Server info, just tons and tons of data. Oh, DB. Yeah, this is a blank password, as I recall. I think that might be all I need to do is just say connect in this case. Show databases, go. If I was a little bit of SQL, I could find out more, but I found a couple of databases on there already, and you can manage databases on the remote box as well. They also have, some shells have also extra functionality. Like, see this bind shell? If I didn't want to do this all over HTTP, I could actually have it do a bind shell or a reverse shell back out to me. Is anybody familiar with the difference between a bind and a reverse shell? Bind essentially says, hey, open up this port, I'm going to tell them something. Reverse shell, instead, it sends the connection to you and you grab it, like let's say with Netcat. The advantage of a reverse shell is if they're behind a NAT box or something like that, it may still be able to get out. Most people's egress filtering is a lot weaker than the ingress filtering. And it's got some other functionalities, but this is a fairly decent shell. I'll show some other ones here shortly.
Hey, question.
Yes?
If you're going to do that, the reverse shell, do you have to set up a port to listen on?
Yes, you do.
That's that connection, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You'd have to do that.
Thank you.
But before I go into one of the more advanced shells, I had an interest in this for a while, so let me show you some scripts I wrote to detect these kind of problems. I actually got my site pwned about a year ago. The way someone found it was I had a friend who I was shared hosting with, and I'm letting him use another site. He had the same group ID as I did. He had file permissions to my files. Someone found like an exploit in whatever content management system he was using. This is the best I can tell. Then got into my site and started putting web shells all over the place. So I got intimately familiar with web shells at that point. It made me develop a few scripts. I got a script out there on my website that automatically looks through all my pages, MD5s, all of them, and then watches for changes. Granted, MD5, there's collision issues and so forth, but probably not so bad that in the way I'm using it, you'd have to still modify the file in such a way that it would still function the way you want and still give the same MD5 hash. So for my purposes, MD5 is probably okay, but essentially it's like tripwire. Watches for any kind of changes. I've also written a couple scripts so I can sit there and watch what people are doing to my box. For instance, here's my log watcher, and I may regret clicking that later on. It basically allows me to look through my logs for things. I've got it IP and password restricted. Though I should be using it over HTTPS. It gives me information about the top 403s, top 404s, and so forth, and also top 500 errors, because generally people are trying to attack your site. While they're doing the scans, they're quite possibly going to throw a lot of errors in your logs, and you can look at these and go, oh, why is this person requesting so many pages that don't exist?
Denial of service?
Well, not necessarily denial of service, but they could be using something like Durbuster, or I think Akinetics does it. There's a few different packages out there that basically look for common CGIs that have issues, and so those may be looking for like WordPress on your box, even if you don't have WordPress. But this thing's kind of hanging right now. It's doing these whois queries. If this actually worked right, I'd be able to put my mouse over one of these and it would give me a bunch of information about what kind of traffic it was getting. But currently my server's a little too bogged down. Oh, I can also throw people into my shit can. Essentially, it adds something to my HT access that says don't let this person through. But let's go instead to show password grabs. We were talking about remote file includes before. These are people trying to get to the password file on that server. So you see the dot dot slash. And sometimes you'll see one of these dot dot slashes with a 0 on the end, or %00. That's them trying to use that null character to keep me from pinning on like a .htm. Also, I get tons of remote file includes. Like, here's all the unique ones. Some of them aren't people actually trying to include stuff. There might be include stuff into my code. There might be these people trying to use me as a proxy. Because you can also use remote file includes as a type of proxy. But you can see there's a bunch in there. Another script I developed, and this one, it looks for just remote file includes. Here's a bunch of people who have been trying to do remote file includes on my box over the last month or so. I break down information like who the attacker is. If I want to find out who the attacker is as far as who owns the IP address, I can actually do a who is on it. It sends me off the rob text and tells me who that is. If I really wanted to, I guess I could file an abuse complaint. Also, it lets me see what's there. Like here's a web shell someone's trying to apply. You see that one's all obfuscated, all the hell. Oh, sometimes you get one that's obfuscated and you can actually decode it I'm not sure if I have a good one here or not. Some of these may not necessarily need any. Great, browser's freezing up. There's actually some decoders online. I linked to someone's who will automatically parse some of these and undecode them. Like you saw that one with the eval and all that garbage in it. Well, the eval base 64 and all that, they'll actually decode it for you and show you the raw code, which is a handy feature to have. But this script I'm going to make available before long. It's not out there yet, but I plan on putting it out there shortly. And since this browser's frozen, okay, that one returned to 404. I have it, by the way, checked for ones that are 404. And one of the things the code does is in its user agent, when it tries to go check to see if a page is still available, it puts something in like, I am not attacking your website, but someone is trying to use your website to attack me. And tries to make them aware that you have a web shell installed on the box, or someone has a web shell installed in the box, because they may not even know this exists out there. All right, let's show a more advanced shell, especially since my browser is currently hanging there. I have just a basic Ubuntu, or specifically Xubuntu, install set up with running Apache. And right here I have Kali Linux. There is a shell. Now, the ones we've been using so far have used get or puts to exchange information, but a lot of people may be looking at those. But you can use things like cookies to exchange information. So let's show a more advanced shell. There's one called Weebly. Here it is. You can essentially just get it via git clone and whatever. Git clone and the URL to Weebly. Actually, I'm going to rm-rf because I just created another one that I don't need. But here's the files you get with that. You can create a new shell fairly simply. Basically, you just tell it to generate and give it some password to generate. I used some password. And it will then generate something that looks like this. Which is highly obfuscated. The functions, names themselves and so forth are encrypted. It's just a mess to actually read and parse through. So let's go ahead and actually put that one up on the server and see what we can get. This one is a little different, like I was mentioning before. It doesn't use get or puts. If we were to go out there to try to look at it, be helpful if I actually get that right.
V in there.
What I'm missing?
You got one extra V in there, I think.
Yeah, thank you. Doesn't show me anything at all. Oh, by the way, there are certain shells that also look if you're a bot like Google, and this gives you a 404 if you try to visit the page, because people don't want other people taking over their bots. Oh, by the way, I mentioned those different subtypes of shells. Most ones I've been showing have been uploaders and just standard shells. There's also ones like booters, which are designed for its denial of service tools. So you have it running on a web server someplace, and you can tell it to like send a bunch of traffic someone's way. Now granted, it's only one machine, but usually web servers have a lot more bandwidth than the average home machine. And there's also tools that people upload with these, like local root escalation vulnerabilities, so that you might be running as www data right now, but if they have certain local root vulnerabilities, someone might be able to escalate that. So we can't actually access Weebly that way. You have to access Weebly with a particular client. And let me go ahead and bring that up here in a second. Let me go back to Kali. And one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to fire up Wireshark. And we're going to sniff some communications. I will tell the Weebly client, now it's a Python script, to connect to the remote box and use some password to connect. And there I am, I have a shell. Now I can do my normal commands, issue commands. I can, the tab completion is not working right now for some reason, which I'm not sure about. cat out password, do whatever you want. But the thing about Weebly is, one thing is it's not doing gets and puts. It's actually passing things in cookies. So if I do a follow TCP stream, you notice how I'm getting things in here. And it's actually doing the requests over cookies. So Weebly can be pretty stealthy. I always showed you how it encrypts the file, or at least obfuscates it. Let's look at some of the modules you have. :help. There's a version of Weebly, I believe, that comes with Kali Linux. Also, Kali Linux comes with a bunch of different web shells. I've been messing with mostly PHP, but there's ones out there for Code Fusion, ASP, ASP.NET, Perl, what you name it, there's something out there for it. But I have some of the SQL console, network scanning. Apparently, you can set it up to use as a proxy. So once you compromise the web server, you might be able to proxy into it and then use other tools inside the person's network. Open a backdoor TCP port. Let's see, issue general commands, of course. Audit user files. Look for files that have weak permissions. Just tons and tons of options are built in here, and I believe you can add your own modules as well. So it has a ton of features. Let me see. I was going to show one particular one if I can find it. Might be system info. Let me try this. System info tells me a bunch about the box. Like I said, you can do network scans. This Weebly has a lot of different functionality. Control C to exit back out of that. There's also various tools for finding these, and I don't remember all the syntax for them, but actually let me move over to the other site. We can find these in different ways. One way we might do it is just to grep through our file for anything where someone tries to do a remote file include. Like I'm going to grep from my access log, and all that traffic looks a little bit suspicious. You see where I tried to grab my uploader earlier. There's also various tools you can use. Like there's Webshell detector. Instead, I'm going to show NeoPi. Both have do things in slightly different ways. That's not what I want to change into. Now, NeoPi, we can actually scan a directory. Since I don't remember all of its command options, I've been lazy and actually just going to copy and paste from my notes. But it tries to detect on several different things. It does have general signatures, but signatures are likely to fail in many cases. It also detects by how random the file is, its entropy. For instance, if you have a file that's encrypted, in theory it's going to have a very high entropy. It's going to be very, very random. And you can look for files like that. And here's some files it suggests are web shells. And if I was to look at some of the top ones, like if I was to take a look at this particular file and see whether or not it actually does look suspicious.
Andrew, you're running this tool on your web server to look to see if anyone's put any web shells on your server?
Yes.
Okay.
This is one for detection. Well, looking at that garbage, yeah, that most likely is a web shell, because there are legitimate reasons, I suppose, for obfuscating your PHP, but not many, I don't think. Oh, another interesting thing about this one, I think that they found some upload vulnerabilities in some place that takes images, so they put the header to make it look like it's a GIF, so it will get past someone's weak file restrictions. Someone might be looking, oh, is it really a GIF based on the header? Well, based on just the header, this is a GIF, but not so much when you actually execute it. That is the core of what I thought I was going to cover. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I actually want to show off at this point. Let's see. Yeah, other than that, I'm going to release the code for this one that automatically searches for likely remote file includes and shells. But if you go out to my website, I think you just Google search for web shells. It should be near the top of the list. And you can look at a collection of ones that other people have put out. Like this one, I'm not sure if, let me go the one down. This one I think is some kind of Buddha script. I need to analyze it some more. But but it actually logs into the IRC network. And some of these shells seem to use IRC as another channel for communications, kind of like some old school bots did. But right now, that particular page is not responding for me. Well, I think that's about all I really had to show.
Very good.
So that's it. Thank you.
Definitely appreciate you taking the time. So Adrian was finishing up his master's degree recently, so to squeeze this in, we definitely appreciate it.